So let's have a look at the first part of this conversation, which is talking about methamphetamine use. And I want to say one thing before we start, because we're very fair on this show. We will judge this government by how they judged the last government or for the standards they set for themselves. Now, you probably can't remember this, Chewie, because it was hardly ever talked about, but there was this thing under Labor called ram raids, right? You probably don't know what I'm talking about. It's a very kind of niche subject matter. And how the last opposition party, National, wanted to make it very, very clear that the incumbent government was 100% responsible, 100% responsible for those ram raids. Okay? We will judge you by the same standards. An increase in methamphetamine use is 100% the responsibility of this government.
Have a look at these numbers of the wastewater testing. Now, if you look at that spike, cuts at customs came into effect in the middle of last year. I mean, it sort of directly coincides, at least in terms of timing, with the spike that you can see with the methamphetamine levels in wastewater. According to the restructure document from customs and reporting from staff at the time, those cuts included 12 customs officers. Given your interagency work, is it your view that cutting customs staff has potentially resulted in more methamphetamine coming into New Zealand?
Got to say as well, because I have cut quite a bit out, there was a point earlier on where the police commissioner said the increase in local labs has not gone up, so there hasn't been an increase in local labs. So the increase in meth use is all coming across the border, which is why the customs question is so relevant.
Well, that's not something that I would comment on, Jack. I mean, customs have gone about a restructure. They've made decisions based on criteria. That's not for me to comment on.
It does coincide directly with that huge methamphetamine spike, which you were then dealing with.
Well, that could be an assumption, but, you know, yeah, I'm
timing-wise, it correlates, yeah.
Timing correlates. Whether that's an issue that correlates to the actual problem, I'm not sure.
In your view, from your office's work, do you believe that customs has the resources it needs to fight back against these international syndicates?
We work very closely with customs every day, and not just here in New Zealand either. So, you know, I'm proud of the work that my people do with customs, and I'm sure customs are too. That's got to continue, because it's ultimately at the border where that protection needs to be at.
Is that a what?
Is that an answer? And
he does very well. Look, I'm on the fence a little bit about the criticism, because I do understand a political appointment probably shouldn't sometimes. But when he says, I have got no answer to that, when Jack says, does the timeline line up? Oh, I wouldn't speak to that. It's like, well, that's actually not, because it does. You can look, this is where they were fired, this is where the number. So you can say yes to that. That's not a political answer.
It's absolute best.
And is it?
Well, I'm proud of what we do. I know customers are proud of what they do.
Yeah, look, you're proud, but is it at its best?
Well, I think this is part of the work that's underway to look at what new opportunities there may be.
Let me reframe it a different way. Would giving customs more resources mean that less methamphetamine comes into New Zealand?
Well, I think you have to ask customs that. I mean, I'm quite sure that would give the opportunity for us to.
Yeah, the answer is yes. So it's not difficult. Obviously, let's be silly, if we had 500,000 more staff, yes. If we had 500,000 fewer staff, it would be terrible. Where's the number in the middle? So the obvious answer is yes. That's where politicking becomes a bit too much.
To work even more broadly with customs, more resource, more work, and the demand, as you can tell, is high. So it's obviously common sense that would make sense, but it's not for me to comment on whether that's something that's an option.
So he said yes, it's common sense that would be the case, but I better not say it in an official capacity. I've got like 4 little clips, Chewie, to play as we go through, but what are your thoughts about that one to start with? So methamphetamine going through the roof. Remember, we listened to someone a couple of weeks ago who said nowhere in the world has methamphetamine use increased in the percentile that it has in New Zealand. So there you go. We are leading the world in something, Chewie.
You can tell a political employee, because why use less word when many word will do? without actually answering anything. It was excellent. I think that aspect that like local labs and cooking them here, this is an imported product, and when people go, well, what the fuck? It doesn't necessarily come on a domestic flight in someone's suitcase, because you'll probably get pinched that way. That's where customs is in the airports, right?
Yeah.
Where it isn't is in a little marina on the Coromandel or in the far north, where you can sail from one of the islands where it's been imported in bulk. There isn't the resources to have people check those boats coming in. So now it's easier. And the only silver lining to this is Luxon has promised us a laser focus on the cost of living. And if there's a lot of meth around, that cost has gone down. Mission accomplished.
They spent, like each of these clips I've taken out, they probably spent 6 or 7 minutes talking about the 500 new police, backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. I've just cut out a good kind of 90 seconds of it. So he is getting asked the question again, what about these 500 police? And again, remember, definitely by the end of this year, definitely by the end of this year, definitely. Well, it was an aspiration, possibly by next year. Mark Mitchell, well, I'm probably going to quit if we don't head out. Well, it was an aspiration. And so this police commissioner sort of caught in the middle of all that. And he's the guy that obviously is going to benefit or not from those 500 police in his workforce.
With the best information you have available at the moment, when would you say you are likeliest to hit that 500 new police target?
I'm absolutely focused, obviously, on the end of November this year. That's the ambitious goal.
But you said that's not going to happen,
The reality is, it will be a challenge. We still work with that in mind, but
He's already said it's not going to happen, but he's still now saying it will be a challenge. That's how he is saying it's not going to happen.
More likely to be, I would say, early part of 2026.
Early part of 2026.
I'm hopeful. I'm positive, and I'm staying positive. And I've given my people additional resource to speed up the process. We have a very, very intense testing regime, which I'm not prepared to compromise, and I am a little disappointed to learn that in more recent times some decisions have been made that. But, move on.
He's talking about a swimming test. They removed the swim test from becoming a police officer.
Well, no, they straight up missed it.
Well, they don't do it anymore, so he's bringing it back. He's talking about bringing back a swim test. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether it's going to make much of a difference. What? And, of course, he's doing the police commissioner version of blame Labour. Decisions made before I came on board, not but the previous police commissioner. Yes, Chewie, sorry.
Well, first of all, the swimming thing's clearly a beat up. Why does an island nation full of rivers and beaches need police that can swim? It's clearly a waste of time. Yeah. This is what's been said all along, right? If you want to increase your numbers and it's not working, then you lower your standards.
Yeah.
Is something like skipping the swim test a sign of other things that there's going to be outright shortcuts or things glossed over?
That was talked about.
End up with a lower qualified police force that's going to make more mistakes.
I guess the only thing we can say is we'll have to see, because the way he told it in this interview was, we are going to be very stringent with the qualifications. We are not going to cut corners. So I guess the proof of the pudding and all that. We'll get to this end of this first segment or second segment.
I'm being clear about expectations, and we will continue to work very hard to make sure we hit the deadlines, or at least as close as we possibly can.
Last question on this, and then I'll move on. I promise. Are we looking at first 2 quarters of next year, first half of next year?
It's hard for me to be precise, Jack.
Best information you have. I mean, what would be your best estimate today?
I would love to think that in the early months of June in 2026, June has been said as a possible date. Could be June. I would like it to be a lot sooner than that.
There you go. Police, Chewie, anything you want to comment on the police?
So much that I would want to comment on the police. Look, if they can't recruit, then what's your other option? Retain. And it
Yeah.
just seems there's a focus on this. There's a very clear, we're working very hard, we're laser focused on what I said at the election, which is that we're going to recruit 500 new cops. They're not talking about retention. They're not talking about retaining the skill levels, the time and the effort that they've put into stuff that we already have. It's too late. They left that door wide open, and they're off to Australia, where they are valued.
He did say in this conversation, and I think the number was 130, that there were, and I'm going to use that number because I think it's what he said, 130 police officers that are thinking about either repatriating or maybe they've left the police force within New Zealand and they're talking to them about coming back. So there's something else, which is not really a retention thing, but it was perhaps a repatriation or a reinsertion of older police, not older as an age, but previous police officers in New Zealand being police officers in New Zealand again. That was part of the conversation. Yeah. So then the last part, well, not the last part of the conversation. The last part of the conversation was around guns, which we're going to include in the Nakoma Key conversation. But this is the bit that was the headline on One News, which was the institutional racism. Now, this was like a 9-minute bit, and I've cut it down to 2.5 minutes. It's actually 3 segments put together. You'll see where the gap is. I don't ever want anyone to think we're trying to fool them with an edit. The edit's very clear with a white flash and a sound. But let's have a conversation here about, is there institutional racism within the police?
All other things being equal, Māori are 11% more likely to be prosecuted than New Zealand Europeans. I mean, that would at the very least, from the outside, suggest a degree of institutional racism might exist within the organisation.
Look, in my 30 years of policing, Jack, I have not personally seen an attitude.
He's demonstrating he doesn't understand what institutional racism is. Institutional racism is not individualized. I've never seen it. It's a very different thing. And it's also obviously about the results that institution can be counted on.
Toward Māori that I am concerned about in terms of values. It's, our commitment to Māori and the tree is one of our values. We've worked with Māori for over 30 years, started by former Commissioner Peter Doon. It remains a huge priority, not just for police, but for Māori communities.
So why does that discrepancy exist?
Well, look, that piece of work, no doubt. I've worked very closely with Sir Kim Workman over the years. We have a good working
This was a report done, spearheaded by Sir Kim Workman. That's the report they're talking about.
Relationship together. Where there are opportunities for us to think and work together better, identify new opportunities, we will do that. I mean, that's the open mind. I want us to go.
So the question is, though, why does that discrepancy exist?
I can't explain that, Jack. I can't explain that.
You said emphatically that institutional racism doesn't exist within the institution. I brought you that number from Sir Kim Workman. I mean, in September last year, Stuff Analysis compared rates of cannabis use to rates of cannabis prosecution. Of course, discretion applies for police here. More Pākehā used cannabis, but more Māori were charged with cannabis offences.
There we go.
Game over. Like, that's game over. Now, the other thing, which we're not bringing it up tonight, but we talked about last week, is then what they're saying is more Māori are arrested, but actually then in the court system, more Māori are convicted than non-Māori for doing the same thing. That's what the research says. So actually, I don't know whether it's better for him to stay neutral-ish on this. It's not better, because anyone with half a brain cell can see that the stat that Jack just gave out unequivocally proves the exact definition of institutional racism. Within the institution, they treat brown people harsher than white people. Institutional racism. Simple as that. Do you want to say anything before I hit play again, Chewie?
Yeah, I know you did a lot of work to cut this down to a shorter patch. I can actually cut it down even further. Do you think there's institutional racism in the New Zealand police? Yes. You can just click the yes somewhere from ours, and that's what we could have done. His lack of understanding on this question is damning. It's devastating. It's someone in his role, just distilled this down to, well, I never saw any racism when I was a cop.
But you're giving him credit or the grace of not understanding, because the alternative is he does understand, but denies anyway. There's two possibilities here.
There's
And
been
neither are
so
okay.
much studies. There's so much research that has gone into this. The police have acknowledged it in the past that they need to do more work. This was his opportunity to go, yes, there is, and we're working really hard to fix it, and this is what we're doing. Missed opportunity. Absolutely missed. And the fact that he's gone down this path, I will remember.
All right, we'll keep going.
To rates of cannabis prosecution, of course, discretion applies for police here. More Pākehā used cannabis, but more Māori were charged with cannabis offences. Why would that be?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm hopeful of is that we've also considered alternative resolutions to many of the situations frontline staff deal with. So Te Pairanga is one example of that. So when it comes to things like cannabis, and this is not about Māori, it's not about Pākehā exclusively.
Well, it is.
It's about
because Māori are being charged more, but Pākehā are using more.
Yes, look, I appreciate the statistics.
Are you open-minded enough?
There was something else that he said which I cut out of the conversation, which is sometimes we'll get it wrong. And in my notes, I wrote down, and Māori pay the price. That seems to be pretty evident, that sometimes we will get it wrong, and the people who feel the error that police will make will disproportionately be Māori over everybody else.
Are you open-minded enough to accept, though, when you reflect on that data, that maybe you could be wrong about institutionalised racism within the organisation?
No, as I say, of 30 years of policing, I have not personally seen any example of that.
The thing is, it's institutionalised, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not these one-off things. It's across the entire system. That's the kind of nature of it.
Yeah, well, look, I want to stay focused on the positive. I want to keep working really, really hard. We have a lot of things underway right now to strengthen our understanding of cultural competency across a whole lot of different cultures in New Zealand. There's a lot to be proud of. The statistics, as I say, they are what they are. That says to me, well, we've got to keep thinking about this. But in terms of, you talk about institutional issues, no. I will continue to emphatically deny that.
Okay. Jack needs to dumb this down a little bit more. Do you recognise that this is a coffee cup and that it is red? Yes.
Could be a teacup.
I've seen the coffee cup, and so I acknowledge its existence. Okay. Does the coffee cup still exist? No, I can't see it. That seems from one of our top cops. If I can't see it personally with my eyes, it doesn't exist. Is a fucking weird hill to die on, rather than go, yes, we've identified a problem, we're working to remove that problem.
I wonder, like when you hear some of those answers, and people are saying in the chat as well, there is an element of the PR spin of Mark Mitchell. You can kind of hear it in his tone.
It's cop talk, right? They all talk the same. I love cop talk when they're having a press conference and you're like, listen to the old cop talk. They all talk the same. Your police 10-7, all of that sort of stuff. But this is just shocking. Like, you can't have the political appointment aspect of this job and just regress into, I never did a racism and neither did any of the blokes that I worked with, so therefore it doesn't happen. And these statistics that you're talking about, Jack, your fucking magical statistics that are based on nothing, don't mean anything, because I'm not going to cop to doing a racism when everything points to Māori Pacific Islanders get caught more, get charged more, get stiffer sentences and consequences for the same crimes.
Yeah. That's the important part.
What is that? Like, you can look, like, it's a hard question for the police. Like, we have a problem with systemic racism. Why is that? Is that because we more heavily police poorer areas, and the people that live in poorer areas tend to be Māori and Pacific Islanders? So then you get you soak in an attitude that all you're dealing with is Māori and Pacific Islanders, so they must all be like that. Or maybe it's because police's interactions with this community, because they can't trust them, because they're so much more frequent than the rest of the population does, they're fucking sick of it. And they react badly. And so the cuffs come out and the pepper spray comes out and all of this sort of stuff. Like, these are hard questions. I don't have answers for them. Do you need to cycle cops through different areas more? I don't know. Do we need more people from these communities to be in the police? That was seen as an answer, and the police did a lot of work on that in the mid 90s to mid 2000s and probably onwards. Of going, we need more Māori, we need more Pacific Islanders, we need more Asian staff, and that sort of thing. We need the police to represent society. That seems to have gone away a little bit.
I was thinking that exact thing, that the police commissioner talking about his past, that there was him and Mark Mitchell and 40 other white guys. We never saw any racism anywhere.
Yeah.
So, Yeah,
we just knew what part of Auckland to go to when our arrest quota was a bit light.